Welcome to Realworld Psychology, where we talk about psychology in the real world and how it affects the real world, not in books and in theories, but how it affects everyday people. Today, I'd love to talk about really a serious topic, in particular, post-traumatic stress disorder and acute stress disorder, so PTSD and ASD, and really how people in everyday life can help those who struggle with these issues. And because there's a stigma to it, and people who have PTSD and have ASD tend to be ashamed of it, and if they aren't ashamed of it, sometimes they're in denial that it's even there. They just say it's just who they are, the way their behaviors and who they become. So first of all, what is ASD and PTSD in a nutshell? PTSD occurs after a human has experienced a traumatic experience. And the traumatic experience is basically burned into their brain. One of the major things that PTSD does sometimes, it doesn't really let you sleep. And so a lot of the things that happen to people who suffer from PTSD is actually side effects of sleep deprivation, and them literally trying to find ways to sleep. So there's a lot of dreaming, there's a lot of reliving events that are traumatic, and traumatic experiences you could really break down into in a really simple way is an experience that person believes should never have occurred. They never even thought, they never dreamed this event should never have happened to them. And sometimes it's based on an experience. Sometimes it's based on people being naive. There are people who join the U.S. military in combat roles, and their best friend is taken away by an IED, by a bomb, by a bullet, and it breaks them. And it's tragic. But on the other side, you could say, well, you join the military, that's a risk you run. That is the sacrifice that, we hear freedom isn't free. But that doesn't make it any less traumatic to someone who never thought that it would be someone within their immediate circle that would actually suffer this fate. So, and it's not even just that. Sometimes it's witnessing something and not being able to help. There are protocols and procedures in the military where, sometimes it's your job is just to sit and watch and not engage and not actually do anything. You're just supposed to be more of an information relayer, and you have to sit there and watch something happen. Maybe you have to watch people die just because. And you're not allowed to save them. And so those things stick with people. And they're things that we believe shouldn't happen to us. And therefore, these things basically get burned into our brains like an iron. And it scars us. And one of the big things that happens is when you come home, you basically walk around with these things just floating in your brain. And certain situations bring these memories to the surface. Say you're walking down the street and you see someone who's of a certain ethnic background, and wherever you were serving, this person's ethnic background is, they don't even have to be from there, but they look like they might have been. It can cause everything from panic attacks to violent outbursts to, to things that we look at the person performing these really negative behaviors, and you look at it and you go like they're either crazy or they're just an asshole or you name it. And what ends up occurring is we don't ask the questions of why. We don't do a heavy deep dive into their psyche. And what you'll sometimes realize is that when they were deployed, somebody who looked similar to this person was walking on the street, pulled out a gun, and killed someone who was literally standing right next to this former soldier. So just walking down turns into a confrontation on this same street. They literally put themselves back into the deserts of Iraq or Afghanistan or into the forests of South America. And so how can people help these people who are really struggling with these problems of their past? Because they're basically just reliving their past over and over and over again. And it doesn't take long before people stop sleeping or before people start using some type of substance to stop caring. And it'll eventually happen, especially those who really kind of realize there's a problem and they discover that the solution to just function in everyday society is alcohol, some type of drugs, and other things. Like they might even turn to antisocial behaviors such as like just playing video games for like 16 straight hours because it's just like it just takes them away. It focuses them in on something else, which actually leads to like one of the biggest solutions to post-traumatic stress disorder, which is just staying busy, just being distracted. But it's more than just being distracted. Like the video games and alcohol, like that's the actual, like that's just like a raw, like that's just a raw distraction. It's like empty calories. You're not actually getting anything from it. You're just kind of, it's food to feed you, but there's no like positive thing that you're actually getting from besides just this raw distraction. And so there has to be some type of meaning behind the distractions. Some type of long-term purpose. And this long-term purpose can be something along the lines of maybe helping other people who are deployed with you or who are just veterans. Helping them kind of get through everyday life. It could be coaching kids or high school, college, whatever, young kids, where you have to like go every day and you're not thinking about you. You're trying to figure out how to get this team rolling. Finding a job that isn't boring. So that isn't you just kind of sitting there bored out of your mind thinking, because the thoughts are the enemy at this point in the game, especially in the early stages. Now, PTSD doesn't manifest itself for about 6 months after traumatic events occur. Now, acute stress disorder is PTSD's younger cousin, little sibling, little brother, sister, whatever you want to call it. And basically the whole idea behind acute stress disorder is It's PTSD that lasts about 6 months, and you basically get over it on your own. Therapy helps tremendously with it, but you basically get over it. And that doesn't mean you don't carry something with you. That doesn't mean there aren't scars, but you can just reintegrate yourself into whatever you were previously doing. Say you're a runner, or just a hiker or a walker or whatever, and you're crossing a road and you get hit by a car, and you break your leg, or maybe don't even break anything, but you're gonna be tentative to walk across the street again. It might take before you just would put your foot out there and start trudging across, but now it takes a good 2 or 3 minutes to kind of get some courage to cross, and early on you might not even be able to. It's you need someone else there to kind of help you out. But within 6 months or so, you might be more cautious. For sure, you might be more cautious. You might even have physical scars, but you're able to cross the street again. So you get over it. PTSD is quite a bit different. PTSD is basically the idea that after 6 months, you see that road and it's still, you can't do it. Now, you might be able to cross maybe when there's no cars coming, but you see a single car and it's like, nope, I gotta wait. I can't do it. It's not safe. Like, it's not safe here. And because you just keep replaying this picture of you just getting whacked by an SUV. And we see people have PTSD in outside of the military quite often these days. You can see it from anywhere from tragic accidents to really like any type of sexual assaults. A lot of people are coming out now, especially with the Me Too movement, and really telling their stories about things and how it's actually affected them over the long haul, and how people have really kind of kept it internal, and how it's affected their relationships with others. And that's the big thing. Like, PTSD doesn't manifest itself in the same way with everybody. For some people, it can totally withdraw you from just relationships because you're scared that whatever happened before will happen to you again. You might have deep dive into actually like certain relationships that you deem safe. You might connect with people because you feel like they could protect you, or you might deep dive into kind of what I would like to call selfish selfish items that can, like alcohol and drugs and stuff, that kind of make you more or less not care. And those have their own fun side effects that kind of end up doing a downward spiral because it doesn't help you integrate back into like the bigger social system. And we're humans, like, we need to be part of the social system. We need to be with other people to find meaning. So really the best way people can help other people who are really struggling with PTSD and even ASD, especially, is like if you can see it early on, you might even be able to transition the PTSD into ASD if you can get to someone early enough. This will occur by helping someone actually figure out a mission and a goal for themselves really quickly. And so say someone comes back from the military, like, help them get a job. Like, I mean, have them start interviewing. Like you're home. It's time to kind of get yourself rolling. And it might take it can take people quite a bit of time to get a job, right? But you know, they need help from not only their spouses but also their siblings and from friends. And the worst thing you can do is have someone be isolated. And we see it a lot in smaller cities and smaller towns that might not have the same economic opportunities as bigger cities. You know, you come back from the military and you end up in a 4,000, 5,000 person town in Texas. And I mean, what are they going to do? It's like they're probably going to have to leave. There's probably one or two economic drivers in the town, and if they don't want one of those opportunities, like, they're going to have to go to Dallas or Houston or San Antonio or wherever. But you know, that's hard in itself, just packing up and going. And when you're struggling, sometimes you want to feel as comfortable as you can. You want to be as safe as you can. Going back to, you know, personality traits, a lot of PTSD, what it does is it actually increases your neuroticism. It makes it skyrocket. You become afraid of things. Because you're already feeling vulnerable. And so you need your force field of safety. And what's interesting is, like, things that you once deemed safe are no longer safe. But there's research that describes that PTSD is actually a very natural thing. It's a survival mechanism. And what it has done is it has it's an adaptation to your new environment, to a dangerous environment. So, you know, if you were born in a jungle and you're used to there being lions and tigers kind of being around every other corner, it might not even be considered like a PTSD, like certain behaviors. And then you put them into those, and then you take someone who's from, you know, middle class America, and you put them into this jungle, and they see a few people get eaten by these lions and tigers who are around every corner. They get excessively flinchy. Their behavior changes and actually it starts matching the behaviors of these people who are indigenous. And then you take this middle-class American and throw them back into American society, American life, and they're overly flinchy and cautious, and you know, they might kind of start hoarding things because you never know if something happens, you're not going to be able to actually go out to find resources because some of the predators are kind of being a little more active and roaming. But these are things that helped the indigenous people survive. But they're not necessary in our world. They're not necessary in our culture. But you're bringing these things back with you. So these survival instincts are now actually a hindrance to you, because the bigger group, the bigger societal group, is looking at it as a hindrance, and it might get in the way, right? Where you know, it's say a soldier comes back and becomes basically nocturnal, because nighttime might have been the only time that was actually safe wherever they were deployed. They've come back, and here they are. It's like they can only be up at nighttime, and I mean, that can affect them. That can affect their relationships. That can affect their job prospects. That can affect a lot of things, and because they view, like, basically the daylight as, like, now they're not safe. They're vulnerable. Like a sniper can get me. And the last thing you want to do to someone who really suffers from a lot of these things is basically tell them to get over it, because that isn't helping. Because that actually in certain instances actually makes them feel as more of a failure, or it can start the thoughts of feeling like a failure because, what if they can't? What if they can't let it go? Like, that's just another negative thing, like, entering their mind. So, how can everyday people help? One of the biggest things is, listening. And this is actually really difficult because a lot of times people who suffer from post-traumatic stress don't even like to talk. They don't want to tell people about the things they saw. A lot of times they don't think people understand. And guess what? You probably won't actually understand. And so, but that's actually not important that you understand. What's important is that you get them to start verbalizing these experiences. And this is why it's actually really good to get people who have post-traumatic stress around kids. In terms of like coaching or mentoring or like volunteering, something that just keeps them busy, and having inquisitive people around them who they basically can't just tell them to shut up, because they can get angry at other adults, but kids tend to have this power of dragging information out of you, because kids will be like, well, they find things cool, right? So it'll be like, oh, you were a soldier, like, where did you go? And it's like, I really don't want to talk about it. And 5 minutes later, it's like some other kid will find out because the first kid told him that this person served in the military. Like, hey, like, my uncle was a Marine. Like, where did you go? Did you go were you in Hawaii? And it's like kiddos, I don't want to talk about it. By the time the 15th kid asks the same darn question, this person realized, like, if I just tell them, like, these kids will stop asking. And that might even be just the entry point. Like, yeah, like, I was stationed in Hawaii. Like, that was my first stop. Or Fort Polk, Louisiana, or Fort Benning, Georgia. And then that leads to more questions and more questions and more questions and more questions. So you need to find some way to open them up. And what this will do is it starts turning their experiences into a story. And the more someone who really struggles with traumatic memories, with traumatic experiences, the more they can really, they can tell this story, the more the story stops being painful. Because the story becomes just another life event, such as, what's the difference between, this crazy thing that happened to you in Baghdad, Iraq, where you saw something explode, and you being the reason, that your team lost the state championship basketball game or football game or soccer game or whatever. Like, what's the difference? There's actually a lot, right? But what if they didn't feel different? And that's what these things do, because, as life goes on, you might we'll talk about, like, say you helped your team lose by some blunder of yours. You've probably told that story a few hundred times, maybe even just a few dozen times over your lifetime. But it becomes just a story. It's something that happened to you. It was a part of your life cycle. It was part of your existence. And it's something that helped make you. And these traumatic experiences that people experience in the military, and tragic things that people experience in real life, they need to become those. They need to become just something bad that happened. Because if they don't, like, it's like, the question is like, well, then what? And you know, people will say like, that's not fair. Like we should really kind of respect this trauma. Like we should really kind of like understand how bad it is. And it's like, yeah, and you're kind of subjecting whoever is traumatized to, you know, a fate of eternal hell. Like you're just gonna let them fall into they're already in a dark pit. You're just basically handing them a shovel when you could help build them a ladder. And you know, sometimes the things that someone needs is can kind of be viewed as very unfair. They can be viewed as excessively unfair. Sometimes they need to be told straight to their face very painful things. You know, if something was their fault, sometimes you really just got to tell them that it was their fault. And they might be telling themselves that like in their head already. And so they're guilty about it. And, you know, them kind of coming to terms, that's the big thing. Like, you have to come to terms with your past. And you got to come to terms that, you know, there's a future still. Like, there's another day tomorrow, man. And there's going to be a day after that, and there's going to be a day after that, and there's going to be a day after that. And it's like, you can keep on suffering like this for the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Say someone experienced this when they're 25. There are people who die when they're 95, guys. Like someone suffers alone for 70 years. That is just an epitome, the embodiment of hell. And people, and these people can be helped, and a lot of times, like, they don't even have to be helped by like a paid psychologist. Like I said, like because all a psychologist is gonna do is get them to talk. Like that, like they're just gonna get them to start telling stories. And start talking what happened, write down what happened. Like, that's a biggie. If you can't verbalize it, have them write it. And you see this a lot with kids. You see this a lot with treatment with kids, where they're like, they'll tell them, like, they'll tell these kids, like, what, like, can you say what happened? And it's like, no, it's like, well, can you text what happened? And that's actually a thing now, where it's like we're just write it out. Just write it out. And, you know, and that's and anything is better than nothing. Anything is better than nothing. So, but you need to get it out of their head and into the real world. You have to have them see it and hear it. And because it becomes no different eventually from saying, you know, I got fired. Like, that sucks pretty bad too. And so it's interesting. It's like, you know, we've seen there's plenty of people who are bitter. You know, there'll be a company and they're like, I hope that company burns to the ground. And, you know, you get a job there and you're like, this place is actually pretty sweet. Well, here that person got fired and like is just bitter and just hates the place. So I actually believe we all have we all suffer from some type of trauma. We all suffer from some type of PTSD kind of sort of thing. We all have, really, I believe we experience ASD a lot. A lot of people experience acute stress disorder all the time throughout their lives, and we just don't really realize it anymore. Examples, it's like most phobias. You know, say you hate bees. Someone's like, they hate bees. Like and you find out that, oh, they were stung by like 3 or 4 wasps when they were young, when they were 7 or 8. They were helping mom and dad with the garden. There were a whole bunch of ground wasps. Ground wasps, their hives are basically like in the dirt, like they're like anthills. And they get stung 3 or 4 times, and now for the rest of their lives they just can't do it. The bees, no bees. People afraid of needles. These are traumatic experiences. These are things that they feel should never have happened to them. And and it could be because you're a child and you just don't know that this thing even ever existed before, and now they're monsters. Like it's those things are creatures that deserve to be destroyed, and here they're just, to you and me, they're just bees. You just don't bug them, and they won't bug you. Some people are horrified of water, and they watched a storm capsize some fishing boats when they were younger, and it's like, nope, water dangerous. Water is dangerous. And some people might not ever get over it. Some people might not ever get over it. But if you can teach someone, Dr. Jordan Peterson has a really good way of explaining this, where it's, the world is dangerous, and the world is it can be one big hellhole if you let it. And there's a lot of things to be afraid of. But, if you can help someone be a little braver, because being fearless, like don't be afraid, like that's different from being brave. And I've known people in the military, and I remember once one of my friends really mentioned that bravery isn't being fearless. It's basically peeing your pants and doing something anyway. And you're just kind of walking, just praying to God that it'll work out. And a lot of times bravery will lead to fearlessness in terms of things that you shouldn't even be afraid of. Right? So I think we can all share the experiences of when we first started driving. If you weren't nervous the first time you ever got on a highway, like kudos to you. But I bet 99% of people who the first time they ever hopped on a highway, they were not fearless. They were more brave. And as time went on, that fearlessness, that bravery turned into fearlessness. It's like, you just hop on a highway, you do this, that, and the other, and you don't hit any other cars, and you get where you're going. So PTSD, people who suffer from PTSD, it can become that again. It can be, living can become normal. But people who really struggle need help, and they need people who are willing to help. But I think a lot of times people just don't know what to do and how to help. And one of the things is you should never leave them alone. Not like saying they're not allowed to be in a room by themselves, but sometimes they need guidance. And if you realize that they don't have a plan, if you realize that they don't really, they're kind of just running in circles, you need to help them develop at least a roadmap. Maybe it's going back to school. Maybe it's just a random goal, like running a marathon, or hey, let's try and lose 20 pounds. You would be amazed at how just kind of putting your life together, just kind of organizing and kind of what's your, just having them trying to figure out well, how am I going to lose 20 pounds? Got to organize my diet. All right. So they start organizing their diet, and then, they might start meal prepping, and then they might start doing this, that, and the other. And, they start going to the grocery store because they're annoyed that someone else is buying their food for them. And then they start putting themselves on this meal schedule. They realize oh, well, I have 6 hours in between each meal. I got to find something to do in between these 6 hours. So they actually start finding, so just the organization is a start. And then they can fill this schedule that they're building, they can fill this organization chart, basically, of life with things. But if they're just there, just kind of existing, they're just gonna have, you're handing them a shovel and just having them dig a well that water isn't at the bottom of. I know this was kind of a serious talk, but it's vital, guys. And PTSD is something that I'm very interested in, research-wise, and something I hope to eventually actually find more of a vaccine type of thing for, because I do believe that we can do things to help people before they even experience traumatic things, traumatic stuff. Especially for careers where traumatic events are going to occur. In case in point, the military, police forces, fire services, EMS. I'm sure there are other industries, maybe even mining, where their cave-ins are a real thing. You see them on the news every once in a while, maybe not in America, but in other places. But people need to be prepared for the events of this world, and I think we've done an amazing job of finding ways to help people who are already suffering, but we need to find ways to help people before they even suffer. Because what if you can convert something into someone who would have had PTSD and would have suffered for 4 or 5 years before they would have even sought help, and relationships got destroyed, or they ended up hurting somebody because of their PTSD, because they didn't realize what they were doing. And what if you could convert that person from this PTSD diagnosis to just an ASD, where they come home and they know they're messed up, they know they have problems, and they know that, and from day one they get back and they know they have to do something about it. How does that work? How can we do that? There has to be a way to do that. And I think there are answers to everything. We just haven't figured them out yet, and I don't think enough people have asked some of these really important real life questions. But so this is Realworld Psychology. There will be more, and hope you guys listen to the next ones. Bye.